Hello, welcome to this week's. What is this? It's a little bit different to the content that we normally do, right? It's not a podcast. It's not a webinar. We're not going to do this on a regular basis. I saw an opportunity from an article that Danny put out to have a real life, honest and frank discussion about authenticity. Hugely important in the marketing world, hugely important in the video world. And also, as you're about to hear from Danny, hugely important in business leadership and in everyday life as well as everything else. And I think we put a lot of importance on authenticity, and it means something different slightly to everybody else. What really caught me was Danny put out an article, and I'll introduce Danny and why I care what Danny says in a moment. But he put out an article that challenged authenticity as, is it something that we have to be the same in every scenario and we have to figure out what our true authentic self is? And no matter what situation we're in, we present that same facade all the time. Or is it something that can be flexible and can change based on the people we're around, the business that we're in, the time of day it is, how we feel? And is that still authentic, or is that us being something else? So we're going to dive quite deep into this today. I hope it's of use to people as they're considering, a lot of my audience considering marketing and how do I come across on social media. Danny, as we'll hear in a moment, no doubt your audience are senior leaders considering how they're approaching their team. And I think it's a really important set of questions to ask. We've got loads of polarizing questions we're going to patter the conversation with, and there's no right and wrong answers from our side. We're just going to have a discussion. And one of the things that I really want to dig deep into is, a leader who tries to be authentic can often be seen as weak and unprofessional. And I think that goes for influencers, people who are active on LinkedIn. It's what I see as a common misconception. And I want to dig a bit deeper into that side of things. But Danny, if you'd give us a little, couple of minutes background on your professional journey and why you are where you are now, I think that's really important to the show.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm already looking forward to the conversation just from that intro. So let's see where this goes and how it grows arms and legs, shall we? For those that don't know me, my name's Danny Wareham. I'm an organisational psychologist at Feargun, and I specialise in two areas. One is culture and social dynamics and how do people interact with each other, and the second is personality. Who are we at our core? What are our individual differences, and how do we show that to the world? And I have a particular interest in what we call the dark triad traits, so narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellism. And my work with teams and with leaders, we tend to see a lot of these traits that have benefits in some situations and they're derailers in others, but we tend to see these traits more frequently the more senior that we are in organizations. So we may delve into that later on, I'm sure, too.
Absolutely. I think it's an integral part of the conversation. So the article that really caught my attention was something you released a couple of weeks back. And as I said, it kind of challenged the common thinking. And I'm going to really admit here, I was in with the common thinking until I read the full context of your article. When I first read it and you said, authenticity is something that needs to evolve and change depending on where you're at. My initial reaction was, that's crap. Like, you just are yourself. And surely you would be the same. In my head, I'm thinking, if I'm talking to my family, I'm the same person as I am talking to people in networking situations. And when I read the article and delved into it, you're absolutely right. I'm not. I do have a phone voice for when I'm on video, for example. Right? Like I've changed my accent.
Is this your phone voice now?
It is. It's a lot less. It's a lot less Sunderland than it needs to be. When I say Sunderland, you hear my accent come out. I do this accent inadvertently because I know it helps my transcription pick up my words better, and I have less work to do when I edit. It's not intentional, but it's still authentically me. I'm not trying to change who I am, yet I'm adapting how I speak in order to make my life easier, essentially. So there's that. But then also there's the question of, can you scale authenticity, or by the nature of scaling what you do, does that make you less authentic? So there's a lot to dive into, lots and lots of ins and outs of this. And I don't think there's getting to the bottom of this in half an hour. I think we're going to uncover a lot of questions. We're going to uncover a lot of viewpoints. But the important thing is that when people are watching this at home, they take away, it's to cause you to have a think about what you're doing, how you're doing it, so you come to the right answer for you. It's not about me or Danny giving you the right answer. There isn't one. But there's a lot of things that we can challenge in our everyday thinking. So to come back to the article that's in question, Dan, do you want to kind of give us a synopsis of what you posed in the article? Because I think that's important to the conversation we're about to have.
Of course. I'm very active on LinkedIn, as you know. I tend to post pretty much daily, and I love writing, but there's something about the short, punchy, almost clickbaity content that you can get in a post that just doesn't come across in a long form article. So every week I produce an article that is always based in psychology, but I tend to tackle different sort of limiting beliefs across the industries that I work in. And the authenticity one was based on the idea that is authenticity a static, unchanging thing? So if I'm Danny and I know what my core values are and I know what's important to me, if I stay true to myself and always exhibit those values, regardless of the context and situation I'm in or the audience I'm around, or whether I'm on my own or whether I'm in public, is that what we intend to mean by authenticity? A sort of rigid, structured, I'm being myself? Or is it the case that authenticity is still being true to yourself and what you believe, but how it manifests publicly can be influenced by the social norms of the groups that you're in, which then implies that you will change things like your language, your behaviors, your appetite to risk, whether you'll be open to try certain things or not, whether you become more structured and organized or a bit more conceptual. And in those scenarios, if your style and your preferences and your language and your behaviors and all these things are flexing, does that mean that you're being inauthentic? Does it mean that you could be perceived to be inauthentic? Or does it mean that authenticity is a bit of a myth, which was the title of the article? Is authenticity really, rather than it being this static, unchanging ideology, is it something that kind of is flexible and dynamic based on the situations, who's observing, etc. as well?
And this is a conversation that I have with a lot of people. So my day job is helping people create video content that shares their story, their values, their expertise, their information about their business, why you would choose them over the competitors. And a lot of the conversations I have center around video is great for being authentic. Absolutely. Because providing you're not following a script, when you have a conversation and you're free flowing and you get into it, you can't help but be yourself. There's no faking it. You can't get AI to do it. You can, but you can tell. So in an AI dominated world, video is pretty much the only untouched medium that's out there that can help showcase your true self. But people get hung up on authenticity all the time, because how do I show that I'm authentic? How do I show that my business aligns with me? How do I get that across to my audience? And my answer quite often is just get on camera and be you. And I think that really, really segues into what you've just said, is that you can be a different person in different scenarios and different situations. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. We should embrace that, as long as we're aware of, and I think this is a really important point, we should be aware of how we're acting based on the environment that we're in, because there is a danger that we can start to become unstuck from our true self. We can try and act in a certain way to please a certain person that we're interacting with in order to get the business that we want to get, or create a network relationship that we want to achieve. That actually, in reflection, if we're true to ourselves, maybe we shouldn't be having that connection with that person, right?
As any psychologist will tell you, the answer to any question is it depends. It completely depends. In the case of rich media like video, we as an industry, there's a huge amount of investment in training. So how do you interview well on TV? How do you come across? How do you show that you're more confident? And then from a technical side, how do we edit content so that we get the best slices of the best version of that person? So just by starting this session, and before we started, it was like, be yourself, relax, chill. It's like, well, I'm not a relaxed, chill person. So if I'm suddenly relaxed because I'm not going to get grilled, does that mean it's inauthentic or not? No, because it's still me.
Yeah.
But we each adapt based on what's happening around us, the cultures that we're in, the social norms. My partner's from Glasgow. One of my favorite places is Glasgow in the summer. It's just fantastic. There's a different vibe in the air compared to when it's raining and miserable. The people are super friendly, although it doesn't always come across that way with the staccato in the voice and the accent. I just find myself full of energy and wanting to have a good time. Today, I'm in Stoke-on-Trent, which is like living in Tupperware. It's grey and opaque, and I couldn't tell you which direction the sun was, let alone if there is one. And I'm not really feeling it today.
Yeah.
Does that make me a different person, or am I influenced by factors coming from outside? And it's the same when I speak with my mum and the language I use with her versus speaking with a client versus speaking with friends on a Friday. And that's kind of the point, is you can still be you. You can still be authentic. We just need to be cognizant and aware of how our behaviors manifest, our language changes, because it can be a bad thing. We can find ourselves in situations where our behaviors become poor or even nefarious. Nobody at the post office thought they were doing a bad job, but because this is how we get things done, the social norms, the way we do things around here, it influences completely authentic people to behave in ways that might look like they're out of character.
And it's clear to say that if we want to be seen as an expert and we want people to respect what we have to say and see us as credible and, trustworthy and an authority in the areas that we're talking about, which, let's be honest, it's pretty much everybody who's listening to this in some way or other, whether you're using it to influence people internally, whether you're using it to influence potential customers to come and buy from you. The key is to get that authenticity, or that's what we'd have. That's what we'd have people believe. Well, you've got to be authentic in order to be credible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, Danny? Would you say that's true?
It's a complicated phenomenon. Credibility matters and authenticity matters. But the main motivator in relationships is, how do you make people feel? Your friends are only your friends because they make you feel a certain way. And if they don't make you feel that way, then eventually you will drift apart. But you will accept your friends with all their foibles and idiosyncrasies. You never lend money to Dave. He's a sound guy, but if you give him money, you ain't getting that back. And you accept that because we all have things that aren't perfect. With credibility doesn't necessarily mean I am amazing. I'm the Michael Jordan of everything all the time. Credibility can also be being able to say, life's tough and I made a mistake doing X, Y, and Z. If you're super credible and super authoritative and loads of gravitas and you're an expert in your field, then how that can make some people feel is, this guy's out of my league. He makes me feel inferior and it's affecting my status. And we're a tribal social species, so status is important. Actually, I don't want to work or associate with that person because they make me feel bad about my own, what I consider to be my own insecurities, my own inferiorities. And that may not be true. It may be true. It's about how you feel. So it's subjective to everybody. So to come back to the point, if authenticity is flexible and malleable and changes, then what is it that does build relationships? And to go back to my first answer, it depends. It might be credibility, it might be vulnerability, it might be knowing what you're talking about, it might be how you articulate your stories and your narratives. But ultimately, it's about, how do you make the other person feel?
So there's an interesting side shoot there. We often, to your point, we're always after an emotional attachment to our audience, whoever that audience might be, and it's incredibly important because we all know that the standard phrase, people will forget your job title, they'll forget what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. It's absolutely true. It's a huge fact. And quite often I find that we're telling stories in order to create those emotions, whatever they're meant to be. But if we're in the process of talking about authenticity, is it manipulative to tell a story with the intent of creating emotions in people? Like, is that something that's even ethical, despite the fact that we all want to try and do it?
That is a great question. That is a great question. So from a personality point of view, there's a set of traits that combine to form a thing called Machiavellism. Machiavellism is long-term strategic manipulation of others. So people that are high in Machiavellian traits will be superficially warm and friendly, charismatic, but there's usually an aim to the manipulation. They're being friendly and warm because there's a purpose later on. But if you think of leadership, we kind of encourage that. We want people that are able to influence others and inspire people towards goals and so on. So you can see why Machiavellian traits have benefits in some cases. The big difference for me between is it manipulative or is it influential comes down to motive. Influencing people towards something that is going to benefit them, even if they don't realize it's going to benefit them, is something that salespeople will do. So how do I help you solve this particular pain or this challenge, even if you're not aware that it's a pain point or a challenge point at the moment? Where it becomes manipulation is because I get something out of it, and that's the real core of it. So I'm telling you to buy this phone because I get paid a commission on it. And once this call is over, if you return it or you don't like it, that's not a problem because I've got what I wanted out of it.
Yeah.
That is manipulation. So for me, the motive is what determines whether it's manipulative or influential. So if you're creating content for an audience, or you're planning a pitch in a Dragon's Den style, or you're having an interview with somebody, is it manipulative to shout about things on your CV that are applicable to that specific role that you're applying for? Or is it shouting about specific benefits or features of a package to an audience? Is that manipulative? Or is it trying to influence the decision-making in your favor? Because me being an employee of your organization is going to help you. Me being a provider of services to your organizational business is going to help you. And that, again, that's the difference for me. Influence, it comes from a place of altruism. Yes, that doesn't mean you're not getting paid for it or there's something you're getting back, but the prime motive is, how do I help you? Manipulation is, how do I help me, but make it look like I'm helping you? And they're very, very different things.
I love it. And that plays very nicely into a conversation I had yesterday, which was around networking. And I've got a very good friend of mine who has bottled a lot of what I naturally do in terms of like, for the last 5 years, I've been told by people like, you network really well, you're very good at creating relationships, and how do you do it? And I'm like, I know what to do and I know how to do it. I don't want to bottle that and give it to someone else, not because I don't want to share it, but because it's a lot of work and it's not really my business. That's not what I set out to do, right? Like, that's a lot of effort to create something like that. And I don't really feel the need to do it. I help people in other ways. Yeah, I've got a good friend who has spent that time to figure out how she does what she does, how to reach out to people in cold messages in LinkedIn without spamming them, to create genuine relationships. And this one thing that you hit on there about altruism is that we both agree on, is that in order to be a really good networker and relationship builder, you have to come from a place of service and support and wanting to genuinely add value, not because I know if I do this, I'm going to get money out of it. I'm going to get business out of it.
100%.
90% of my conversations I have with people where I sign a client up, it's accidental. Because I've spent the whole time trying to help them and I've suggested something and they've gone, oh yeah, but can you help me with that? I genuinely didn't have that conversation to get to that outcome. I did it yesterday with somebody I was talking to. I said, do you know what? Have you ever thought of launching a podcast? Because you'd be an amazing host. You're opinionated. You're very educated. You're an expert in what you do. You're not afraid to shout about things. I would love to listen to a podcast with you on. That's what was going through my head. I'd love to listen to your podcast. And she went, yeah, can you help me run it? I was like, That's not what I was. Yeah, I can, but like, yeah, that's not what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So I think that I don't. Is there a way? Right, here's one for you, Danny. Is there a way to change that original mindset, or are people stuck with their original framing of why they want to build those relationships in the first place? Can they change from I'm going to have this conversation in order to create business to
Mhm.
I'm going to have this conversation to help people? Or is it just a mask and we can tell people that's what we're doing, but really we're still in camp here?
As a as a psychologist, it depends.
Yeah.
Um, so the first part is I hate the phrase mindset personally because there's nothing set about your mind. You know, we develop and learn new things constantly. How easily we learn new things, how open we are to learn new things is based on previous experience, coping skills, learned behaviors, and also our core personality. So people that are high in openness to experience, which is a personality trait, um, may tend to find it easier to be more creative, but they may also be distracted by new shiny. Whereas people that are low in openness are far more about the practicalities and how do I make this happen? And people that are low openness naturally may not accept new ideas and new approaches as readily. But that doesn't mean that you can't. Everybody can. Everybody is a work in progress. When it comes to the sort of limiting belief around, if I choose networking, seeing as we're talking about that, 'cause I personally don't like networking. I've been at a networking meeting this morning at 6 o'clock this morning, and I have one every Friday at 6 o'clock in the morning. But it's very different to what people think of as networking. So traditional networking setups tend to encourage selfish behaviors. It's about you going to a room, not necessarily knowing anybody there, and talking about yourself. So I'm going to hand out business cards, I'm going to shake hands, I'm going to make contact, and I'll follow up with them afterwards. So it's by its nature, the environment sets up sort of low agreeable, outcome focused, selfish conversations. They can be pleasant, but ultimately it's about us and our business cards. Whereas there are network groups that are a bit more like referral marketing organizations where rather than going to different networking rooms and different groups of people, you meet regularly with the same group of people and build closer relationships so that they can go out and recommend and be your sort of marketing department. And I find those approaches much better because you can be yourself. You can learn from other people in the group. You all have shared pain as business owners, regardless whether you're a plumber or an electrician or an accountant or a psychologist. All of us know the pain of late payments or what invoicing software should we use.
Yep.
So finding the room where you can be you, and sometimes that you will be, I've had a terrible week and I just need a bit of a crutch to lean on. And some weeks it'll be, it's fantastic and it's my turn to speak and look at me and how great my products and services are. But somewhere you can be you, that's where the authenticity comes back in. And anybody can do that without being influenced by the environment that things like networking tend to do. And they bring out those low agreeable, outcome focused, A plus B equals C. I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to make contacts. And you miss out on where the real value is, which is those accidental conversations where somebody builds up enough trust in you and your credibility and your insecurities and the things you're not good at. They form part of it as well
Yeah.
and go, actually, I think you could help me more than I could help me.
It
And
really
that's all
seems
sales is.
it really seems counterintuitive though when you first start trying to work that way. And you've kind of got to put your faith into trying it properly to see the results out the other side of it, to then believe
Mhm.
in it fully. And I think that's the process a lot of people need to go on.
Yeah.
You've got to be brave to try it in the first place because it
You,
seems
you've got to
counterintuitive.
be,
Why would I go into this conversation without the goal of signing this person up? I need to pay the bills. But if you go into it with the view that this person may or may not be a client at some point in the future, but what they can do 100% is refer me if I'm of value. And I need to provide value to people in order to make myself feel good because I like to help people. And I'm going to help this person in the hopes that maybe someday they might refer me, but more importantly, because I want to help other people.
yeah,
And
a rising tide raises all boats. Yeah.
it's not about even doing it for the reciprocity, right? Like again, that's the same as a sale in my eyes. Like I don't do it for the reciprocity. I do it because I want to help people. And I know,
Yeah.
because I've done it so many times, that the reciprocity will come in whatever shape and form it comes in. I know it will come more often than not. You've kind of got to go through that, just have that trust and faith in the process of
Yeah.
being
And
yourself.
and therein lies a little bit of an Achilles heel that, particularly if you're new to business or if you're under pressure, you've got bills to pay and your pipeline's not looking as rich as it possibly could, then we can look for kind of silver bullets of, right, let's just follow a structured process. I'm going to go to this meeting and this thing, and I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to identify all the architects in the area and I'm going to ring them all. I'm going to have 20 conversations today. And it can become less human. It can become more transactional. And most of us don't like to think that we're just a resource or just a transaction. So we put our barriers up, and actually those conversations get harder. So, and it's not you. You're acting out of stress. You're acting out of being overextended. So you're taking away the kind of core of why should somebody pick up the phone and have a conversation with you, let alone do business with you. I can't know, like, and trust you if there's this wall, this facade of what do you want out of me? And it's part of the reason a lot of LinkedIn DMs fail, because they start disingenuously.
Mm-hmm.
The amount I get that say, oh, the work that you're doing in psychology is inspirational. I'd love to learn from you. Connect, buy my stuff. I'm like, you started the relationship on a falsehood. Where do you think this is going to go?
Hi, Paul, how are you? Implies that we've already had a conversation and you care. Like, and I don't think people come at it from that angle. I think it's just like, that's how we're trained to write copy. Like, that's the first thing. How I would start a conversation. How are you? Like, we're not having an in-person conversation. I can't look you in the eyes. We're not here physically. We need to start with something more creative than that. That's a whole.
When I first started in business, I used to reply to everybody and offer everybody advice. And then the penny dropped a long time later that most of these weren't people. They were CRMs that were just sending me emails or so on. And I find it funny sometimes, the amount of times I get offered beekeeping equipment because my strapline is happy days, no sense of money. And I'm like, you haven't even looked at the profile, so you're not interested in me. And sending those signals to say, I've had a look about you. I don't know you, but at least I've made an effort to try and get under the veneer of your social media or your business webpage and understand a little bit about that. Is it worth us having a chat and correcting my presumptions? That would be a much more authentic way of approaching it. I know everybody on LinkedIn is trying to get business. It's a business platform.
That's the whole.
There are ways to do it that are maybe a little bit more authentic, that are not quite as mercenary and transactional, which is how it makes me feel, which is why you won't get any work out of me approaching me that way. You could be the best person, most altruistic person in the world, but if you approach me in that way, how you make me feel is threatened. So you feel like you're ropey.
Flipping that on its head, I previously worked in a business where the CEO was quite outspoken and polarizing and opinionated about a lot of different topics and quite engagingly outspoken. But his natural tendency, for example, was to swear quite prolifically. Not because it was for effect, because that's the way he naturally spoke. And they were working in quite, a lot of the time, talking to clients that were quite in regulated industries, for example, very professional clients, insurance and banking, things like that. And so we're talking about authenticity. I guess, and I know we've kind of addressed, like, we talking to different people, we pick up a different way of speaking and things like that. But he wanted to continue with the swearing and just being himself.
Yeah.
The business was arguing back that you need to be more professional, otherwise we're going to scare people off here. So what's the line for authenticity? Do you think that that's right? Or do you feel like he should have amended how he was talking in order to be allowed to release that content?
For me, authenticity is relational. It's part of it is about you being true to your values and your drivers and what makes you tick. But part of it is how you're perceived by others. So by its nature, it is a relational phenomenon. If you think of it in those terms, you don't exist in a vacuum then. You have to consider things that are going on around you, the people that are around you, which means authenticity also needs to consider tact and diplomacy. And the language that you use, the way you approach, it sends a signal that I value you and your output. And it's a little bit strange that we kind of pedestal people who are bluntly authentic. You watch TV shows like House MD, who's incredibly low neuroticism, low agreeableness, says it how it is, and it's blunt. And there
Radical.
might be a part of us
Yeah.
that wants to be like that.
Yeah.
You know, the doodle comedy sketches of Veronica putting her boss in her place when she tries to get a holiday, the Sherlock Holmes type programs where people are just themselves all the time, regardless of the bluntness. That's great in a half-hour entertainment show. But in the real world, we have to be cognizant of other people's feelings, how we're perceived, etc. We can do both. We can be aware and be tactful and be diplomatic with others without sacrificing who we are. But not doing it us, not considering that doesn't make us House or Sherlock Holmes. It just makes us a bit of an ass. And not having that emotional intelligence to realize the difference, it's not a superpower. You're not on the telly. So yeah, we need to be aware of others, and tact and diplomacy are great tools in a social species like ourselves. So let's use.
I suppose there's a fine line as well between being yourself and attracting an audience that aligns with you, and being ourselves to a point where it alienates our entire audience. And I think that's the danger that we can sometimes fall into. I speak to a lot of people who are in the financial services sector, for example. They want to release video, but they need to be really, really careful about what they say, because it can be perceived as advice or selling, and they've got all these regulations to consider. They struggle to be themselves. Therefore, they find it really hard to launch a podcast, because their concern is, I'm going to trip myself up and end up in court, or losing customers because I've said the wrong thing, even though I meant right by it. It's really hard in that space. And I think that's why those environments are really prime for good podcasts, because if you can do it, you can really separate yourself from the crowd. But you really do need to be careful, I think.
Yeah. And these things have longer term ramifications as well. So without getting into the kind of politics, my local MP for the last few years was a chap called Jonathan Gullis. And as a Tory MP, he was famous for being very outspoken, very ranty, quite harsh on trade unions and immigrants and various other areas. He as a person's actually a really nice bloke. He used to be a teacher. His family moved around here. And he was in the paper this week that he's earned less than £600 since the Tories were defeated in the election. And part of that is because he was being inauthentic. He was behaving in a way that was expected of the group that he was a part of. And whether he did or didn't hold those beliefs, the reality is that the lack of tact and political agility and diplomacy now means that he's been judged that that's what he's really like. So the perception is, authentically, he is this sort of right-wing, outspoken, anti-trade union kind of person. But the cruel kind of irony about it is that's not necessarily the truth. So we have to be careful about how we show our outside, our persona, what we're trying to get across. We can't do that without having self-awareness of, when are we at our best? How do we show? And what are my blind spots?
That for me is the crucial point for a lot of business owners, is that self-awareness. And some people are absolutely blessed with it naturally. Yeah. Some people have to work much, much harder at it to discover it. Some people have none whatsoever.
There's a reason self-awareness is a chapter in every leadership book ever published. There's a reason that it's there. And we talked briefly on narcissism earlier. Narcissism is a great trait in personality when it's not a personality disorder. So trait narcissism is things like being optimistic and mentally resilient. I'm kind of special. The rules don't apply to me, which means I'm good at pivoting businesses and starting new businesses and being entrepreneurial. Those are great traits to have in some circumstances. Unfortunately, the flip side is narcissism and self-awareness don't always go in hand. So when does that become a derailer? When do you become bigger than the mission? When do you become bigger than the employees? So having the self-awareness means that even people with narcissistic traits could mitigate against when they're tripping themselves up. Exactly the same as people that are warm and friendly and do everything for everybody else trip themselves up when it comes to having hard conversations, chasing payments, and those kind of red line accountability type stuff. So how do you not trip yourself up? And you can't do that unless you're aware of what trips you up. So self-awareness for me is always key.
Love it. So before we just bring the episode to the end, then, like I said at the beginning, a lot of the people I come to speak to have this big challenge around authenticity and what it means to them, and how they can be authentic and still align with their business goals and things. So if you were to talk to a small business owner who was considering video marketing, or really any kind of marketing where they had to reflect their personality in their content, what advice would you give them to help them on their way?
So when I work with businesses around things like culture for me is how do you create the behaviors that are going to support your organizational strategy? Now, your organizational strategy helps you get from A to B. So you need to know where you're going. That's the starting point. Where are we heading? Because how can you align the behaviors, the approaches, the decision making if you don't know where we're going? With individuals, it's the same. That kind of what am I about? What are my values? What gets me out of bed in the morning? If I wasn't working, what would I be doing? And you'll likely find there's a commonality that becomes your sort of Simon Sinek why. That really is about what you're about. That's your sort of North Star for your authenticity. It also then makes everything else easier to decide whether you should or shouldn't do something. So should I follow this marketing strategy or this marketing strategy? Should I target this segment of customers or this segment of customers? And also, how should I portray myself? Should it be on video or should it be on, should I use animations? You know, I've got a face for radio, maybe a different medium's right. What's the language that I use? I wasn't pointing any fingers. What's the kind of language that I use though? I talk in metaphor quite a lot because that's how I make sense of the world. I conceptually pull together abstract ideas. But if I'm talking to clients that are in regulated industries that need what's the structure that we're going to go through? How much is it going to cost me? When's it going to get delivered? Then I can't talk about, a fish doesn't know it lives in water and culture is like the wind and it's invisible. You can see its effects. So I need to be cognizant of how do I land my message to the audience as well, without diluting the importance of the message to me, because it matters to me because I know what that North Star is. So to come back to your point, who are you? Who are you? Everything around your authenticity, that who are you will be the same regardless of where you are. I am all about how do I make you successful? How do I create a place where you can contribute purposely without fear of ridicule, reprimand? That's the same whether I'm working with culture or I play basketball. It's not about me scoring. It's about where do you like to catch the ball to set you up for success. If I host a dinner party, it's not about me and my food, which is amazing, by the way. It's about, is your drink topped up? Is the music right? Is the temperature okay? Is the environment right so that you can enjoy yourself? So I'm very clear on what my North Star is, and it makes my social media, it makes whether I choose to write articles or not, whether I choose to write academic papers or speak at certain events, or all these other things that get your name out there, it makes it easier for me to decide, should I do that or not? And if I don't have that, I know this is a long meandering answer, but you expect nothing less from me, Paul. But if I don't have that, then what we tend to do is what feels good, feels right. Let's try that. And in culture terms, we've had enough Pizza Fridays. In individual terms, it can be very expensive going, let's try this brand and let's try this style and maybe a bit more orange and a bit more friendly. No, I should be blunt. No, I need to have rainbows like Leah Turner. No, they work for Leah Turner because she knows what she's about.
Yeah.
So what are you about?
Fantastic. You're right. It was a long answer, but it was worth the long answer because I think that's what people need to. Like, the short answer doesn't do it justice. The short answer is what's giving people headaches at the moment. You need to spend the time thinking about that, and it's not a complicated answer from the person who's receiving that advice, right? It's not complicated. We do often spend far too long trialing different things, go into all the experts under the sun who all have a different opinion because, and here's my favorite phrase is, nobody knows your chessboard but you. So you're the one that's got to make the answers. All anybody else can do is offer their perspective and their advice. You've got to come up with your own answers. And that's painful to hear because we often want somebody else just to tell us what to do.
Yeah.
Buck stops with
And,
you.
tho-
You're
and,
going to do it.
and on a personal term, those are actually the hardest clients for me to work with. If you don't know where you're going, how can I align behaviors and decisions?
Yeah.
And if you're looking for me to help you identify when you're going, then there's something different that's needed in your organization. You need a strategist or someone who works with vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Know thyself, to steal it from the matrix.
I
Yeah.
love it. Love it. Danny, thank you very much for being a fantastic guest on the show today. I'll put all your contact details in the show notes and stuff. So if anybody wants to reach out to Danny, obviously LinkedIn's great, but just don't send him a cold pitch that is half-assed. Please don't try more beekeeping equipment. He's got so much beekeeping equipment. It's unreal. Although you might want to sell him some condiments or red wine according to his chefing requirements. But
I'm a dab hand with a spatula. I'm not bad. I'm not bad, but the pleasure is from watching other people succeed. And it's not about, and that's a metaphor for my life. Doesn't mean it's a metaphor for yours or anybody else's, like you say. But yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. It's always nice chatting with you, Paul.
I enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
I don't think we've clarified anything massively, but we've asked a lot of questions that are going to get people thinking, and that was the main point. I want to challenge the status quo because you challenged it for me, and whilst I initially reacted and thought, "What the hell's he talking about now?" Actually, when I spent the time to think about it, what you said really resonated, and I already knew it was true. I just hadn't never externalized it. So, thank you very much for writing the article and being the
I
inspiration.
deleted that abusive text you sent me. It's fine. Water under the bridge.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for your time, everyone. Come along and watching us, and I'll see you again for another. I'm just going to do these now and again. I'm not going to say it's a regular feature, but where I find content that I think people need to know about, I think we're going to start doing these one-offs. So give us a follow, watch along, and no doubt you'll see more of Danny in the coming year. See you later, Danny.